Hello and welcome to How to Play Magic the Gathering by Elder Dragon Hobbies. This is going to be a basic guide on how to play my favorite card game, Magic the Gathering, and how to enjoy with your friends. This video will contain the basics, card types, setting up, turn order, casting spells, and then we'll continue on with turn order. So, the basics. You have 20 life, which you can keep track in any way. Generally, you use 20-sided dice. You have a 60 to 100 card deck, depending on how you are playing. You have 1 to 3 opponents, again, depending on how you play. You and your opponent choose who goes first. Normally, you roll a dice, and for example, whoever gets the highest roll wins, and will go first. You have a maximum hand size of 7, I'll go on that later. And before you start, you shuffle your deck of cards, or your library, and draw a hand of 7 cards. If you don't like the hand, you can opt to take a mulligan. This is where you shuffle your hand back into the deck and draw another hand of 7. You can keep doing this until you find your perfect hand, but the more you do this, the worst outcome will be, because you have to put cards from your hand on the bottom of your library once you eventually choose to keep that hand, equal to the number of mulligans you took. For example, your first hand, your hand of 7, if you like it, then you'll keep all 7 cards. If you choose to take 1 mulligan, then you keep 6 cards, and on and on and on and on. So those are the basics. Next we have card types. So first we have lands. There are many lands, but the main 5 lands are plains, islands, swamps, mountains, and forests. These will help provide resources to advance your game, and these are the core of every deck. Next we have creatures, which are the basic means to win. You often, in games, attack with creatures and kill your opponent through damage. Now, I'll go more on that later, but creatures are one of the fundamental key aspects to each deck. There are instants and sorceries, which are spells that once they are used, they are sent immediately to the graveyard. You also have artifacts and enchantments, which both are, just like creatures, stay on the battlefield, but you can't attack with them. Instead, they have special abilities that you either trigger or they will trigger automatically. And finally, you have planeswalkers, which they're a bit complex, but they are similar to creatures in a way that they help you advance your game and sometimes help you win the game. So, setting up. A key thing to every single Magic game is setting up. Now, I'll show you the basic layout, but you can mix it up in any sort of way. So first you have your deck of cards, which you normally place in front of you, normally on your right hand side if you're right-handed, or left hand side if you're left-handed. Then, underneath your deck, you'll have the graveyard, which is where spells go when they are used, when creatures go when they are destroyed, on and on. Right above your deck will be your life total, which in this case, in our scenario, is going to be 20, represented by a 20-sided dice. You will put your lands after you start playing, normally right in front of you, and on the top of that, you'll have creatures, planeswalkers, artifacts, and enchantments. Anything else will normally be above the lands, but next to your library. So that's the basics of setting up. Again, you don't have to set up like this, but this is just the easiest way to set up, easiest way to play. So now we're going on to how to actually play the game and the order in which things happen. So, in a game of Magic, you have a couple of key stages of your turn. you keep swapping turns between you and your opponent or opponents, but this is how the turns go. First, you have your beginning phase, which is the first big phase. First, you untap. Now, I'm gonna go more on to tapping later, but untap is when you turn your land back from a 90-degree angle to a just completely straight. Next, you have your upkeep step, which is really just a fancy step. Nothing much happens there, apart from maybe the occasional trigger or two. Next is your draw step, where you take a card from your deck and you put it into your hand of cards. Next is the main phase. Now this is where you can do multiple things. You can play lands, or you can play spells. Now, casting spells is the key part to all Magic games. You can't win without casting a spell. So, how do you cast a spell exactly? Well, first, you will turn your lands sideways to create resources. Now, the lands will produce resources equal to the symbol on them. For example, these swamps will produce a black, as represented by the skull. Next, you will place the card that you want to play onto the table. In this case, Phyrexian Arena. Now, as you can see, Phyrexian Arena has 3 symbols. The first 2 of them are black symbols, which mean you have to spell black mana or black resources on that spell. In this case, 2 of them. Next, we have this 1. Now, whenever you see a symbol like this, that's just a number, it doesn't have a color or anything, that means that there isn't a specific resource that you have to spend. So you can spend any mana of color. You could, in this case, you could use a black, or green, or red, a white, or even a blue. It really doesn't matter, as it's called generic mana. So, now, there are many different spells that you can cast. There are creatures, which are only cast during your main phases, just like sorceries, artifacts, enchantments, and planeswalkers. Now, there are also some very different spells called instants. Instants are similar to sorceries in that when they are used, they go to the graveyard. Now, unlike sorceries, instants can be played in pretty much any time, so they aren't limited to your main phase. You can cast them during your combat phase, your upkeep if you want, your end step. You could even do it during your opponent's turn. Now, next in turn order is the combat phase. This is generally the phase that takes the most time, as this is when the battles happen. This is when your creatures go into combat to take down your opponents. First, you have the beginning of the combat phase, which is just fancy. Most people ignore it, it's not vital to the game. Next is the declare attackers step. This is when you choose what creatures will attack. What happens when you attack with a creature is you turn it 90 degrees sideways, or otherwise known as tapping a creature, and that is when a creature attacks. Now, next is the declare blocker step, when your opponent, or if your opponent's attacking when you, can choose to block with a creature. This is when you will pit a creature to defend against the attacker. You can only block with a creature if it is untapped. If something is tapped, that means it's been used. So, a used creature cannot block. Now, just a quick side note, a creature that just entered the battlefield can't attack unless it has haste or some other special abilities, because they are sick from their recent summonings. Now, if you want to block with a creature, you generally put it either right in front of the creature, or sometimes even slightly on top of the creature, just to symbolize that this creature is stopping this other creature from dealing damage to this player. Now is the combat damage step. This is when the creatures deal damage to each other. So, in this example, we have our Lord of an Accursed, a zombie, fighting against a goblin. Now, the Lord of the Curse has 2 power and 3 toughness. The power is in front of the toughness. The Goblin, however, is a 1/1, so has 1 power, 1 toughness. Once they deal damage to each other, Lord of the Cursed will turn from a 2/3 into a 2/2, and our Goblin will take 2 damage, turning into a 1/1. Now, whenever a creature's life or toughness has been decreased to 0 or less, it is put into a graveyard and pretty much is removed from play. Now, let's say I wasn't going to block with a Goblin. What would happen then? Well, in this case, you would be dealing damage to the player, since you are attacking the player. This means that you would subtract the power of the creature with the player's life total. So, 20 minus 2, that's 18. Now, again, Planeswalkers, very complex, but you can attack Planeswalkers as well, and they pretty much have their own life points, but I'm not gonna go into that. That's for more advanced playing or intermediate playing. Next is the end of combat step, which is when everything just calms down. Soldiers go home if they're still alive. And next is a second main phase. Now this main phase is if you didn't play another land, if you didn't play your land for turn, which you can only play 1 per turn, you can choose to play it in your second main phase. If you have any spells you want to play that you haven't played in your first main phase, you can do that. And next is the end step. So, 2 things happen in the end step. First of all, you have end step triggers, but the more important thing is the healing process. So at the end step of every turn, all creatures have taken damage heal. So they go from what their toughness was back to what their toughness should be. So in this case, our Lord of the Curse, who has been damaged by a zombie, by the Goblin, turned from a 2/2 to a 2/3 after he was healed. Next is the cleanup step, where the only important thing is if you have a hand of more than 7 cards, you will send cards to the graveyard until you have 7 cards in hand. This is the last phase of the turn. Here, it's your opponent's turn. Now, you simply pass your opponent, they take their turn, then you keep going, and you have fun, until someone's life points have been decreased to 20, or your opponent rage quits. Thank you for watching. I hope that this guide has been useful to you, and I hope that you are now interested in playing some Magic the Gathering. Now please subscribe to Elder Dragon Hobbies, so you can see more videos, whether Magic the Gathering related, or some other content. Press the like button, and don't forget to ring that bell to make sure that you'll never miss a video. Thank you so much.